Desperate millionaire revealed, inspiring cleaner's unexpected actions transform everything. Richard Langley stood amid the lavish emptiness of his opulent estate, the opulence feeling more like a gilded cage than a symbol of success. As the walls closed in and the echo of his footsteps reverberated through the grand hall, dread tightened around him like a noose. His latest business venture had crumbled, taking with it the flickering candle of hope he clung to. The clocks ticked ominously, as if mocking the minutes left in his once endless supply of wealth. Alone. Desperate. And losing control, his eyes fell on the hastily arranged stack of unpaid bills cluttering his desk, a little mountain of reality crashing down on the castle of illusions he'd built. With increasing pressure to maintain the illusion of success, Richard made a rash decision, to hire a cleaner, a detail even he had neglected after years of mad pursuit. He glanced at Maria, the woman he had reluctantly brought on board, dismissing her as just another employee from a hard-working family. She seemed diligent, but he barely regarded her, his mind racing with plans, arrangements, and schemes to escape his spiraling fate. But just as he settled into his routine of avoidance, snippets of her conversations, soft yet powerful, began to infiltrate his seclusion. He overheard her tales about her father's calloused hands and the laughter mixed with tears around their dingy kitchen table. Voices of resilience clashed against Richard's hollow ambition, deafening yet soothing. He couldn't escape them, nor the nagging sense of connection. Days drifted on, and Richard's arrogance only thinned as he became inadvertently captivated, ensnared by Maria's spirit. Yet, the tighter things got financially, the more he clung to his wealth and privilege as he tossed dismissive remarks to his loyal assistant, who, unlike him, was grounded in reality and expectations. Each interaction ignited fractures, their trust beginning to crumble like the walls around him. His assistant's anger simmered beneath the surface, a chorus of frustration that ricocheted off the marble floors, echoing Richard's inner turmoil. What if he completely lost everything? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, breaking the illusion of control he fought so hard to maintain. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. One evening, Maria shared her dream of revitalizing their struggling town, and with it, Richard's stifled creativity exploded to the surface. She spoke of hope and community, ideas that tugged at something long buried within him. But the revelation felt like a betrayal, clawing at him with guilt. Could he really embrace those dreams while risking everything he'd built? Each prospect of a future made the weight of his ambitions feel unmanageable, a tide threatening to pull him under. With guilt gnawing at him like a dog on a bone, he shuddered with the thought of honoring Maria's wisdom against his own interests. Would he squander a chance for redemption? Caught in his tragic internal conflict, Richard stood at a precipice. The glittering facade of his life loomed behind him, and the shadow of purpose beckoned from the dark frontiers ahead. Could he summon the courage to choose a path beyond self-interest? As the desperation for clarity spiraled, Richard faced the chilling truth: to win back the very essence of life he chased, he might have to let go of the fortunes he falsely deemed valuable. The tension crackled in the air, whispering possibilities and regrets, leaving him unsteady, guessing at what was to come. All he knew was that now, more than ever, his fate hung in the balance. Richard stood alone in the lavish emptiness of his estate, the weight of Maria's words pressing against his chest like an immovable stone. The echo of her dream reverberated within him, a threadbare vision, yet vibrant in its simplicity. Revitalizing the town was more than just a whimsical idea for her, it was a call to arms, a rejection of despair that Richard could hardly recognize in himself. His thoughts raced, oscillating between the abyss his life had become and the flickering light Maria represented. She had a fire in her, a resilience that mocked his own brittle ambition. He turned, pacing the marble floors as they reflected the sharp lines of a life built on pretense. The walls, once a source of pride, now felt like a prison closing in on him. Behind him lay success, an empty mirage, before him, a chance to discover something more meaningful. His assistant's resignation loomed like a dark cloud over his intentions. Richard had hardly noticed how the strain of maintaining an illusion was eroding the fabric of his team. The tension was palpable, an unwelcome reminder that his choices impacted more than just himself. He scrutinized the stacks of bills, a reminder of his declining status, yet part of him craved the thrill of starting anew a clean slate. That night, he sat alone in his dimly lit study and opened a laptop that felt more like shackles than a gateway. He hesitated, fingers poised above the keyboard as doubts swirled through him. Could he really redirect his focus from self-preservation to something greater? Was it possible to weave hope into the very fabric of desperation? A voice within urged him to act, to reach out to Maria, to embrace the vision she had so boldly shared. In a moment of clarity, Richard grabbed his phone. He couldn't let this slip away like every other fleeting opportunity. He texted her, his fingers trembling as he typed, "I want to discuss your ideas." As he sent the message, a flood of anxiety gripped him. What if it was too late? What if the promises of change dissolved into yet more empty words? He took a deep breath, reminding himself that this was a chance to transform everything, not just the town, but himself as well. Maria responded quickly, her excitement palpable through the screen, a sharp contrast to his internal turmoil. They arranged to meet the following day. He found himself oscillating between anticipation and dread. This was uncharted territory, he had never allowed the input of others to guide his ambitions. But what was success without a purpose? The thought sent a surge of determination coursing through him. The next morning arrived with the fog of uncertainty still lingering in Richard's mind. Every step toward the meeting felt heavy, yet, with each passing moment, a flicker of hope ignited within him. He arrived at their meeting place, a modest cafe that felt alien in its simplicity. As he walked in, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him, grounding him as he searched for Maria. When she arrived, her presence seemed to light up the small space. She approached with the same enthusiasm he'd seen before, her eyes bright with vision and possibility. Richard's resolve wavered as he was struck by the realization of just how much he had disconnected from the world. "Are you ready?" Maria asked, her voice full of hope and determination. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Could he really embrace the uncertainty of this venture? Here was an opportunity to rekindle his own lost spirit and, perhaps, lead others with him. With each beat of his heart, Richard felt a tiny fracture in the suffocating walls of his past clothes. He wanted to redefine success on his own terms. As they discussed plans that morning, Richard's imagination began to soar, his inhibitions loosening their grip as daring ideas flowed. Yet, lurking in the recesses of his mind was a haunting reminder of all that was at stake. The path before him was fraught with risk, and he couldn't shake the shadow of his past failures. Would this be another blind leap into darkness? Or a calculated step toward the light? The air crackled with unspoken possibilities, and somewhere deep down, Richard recognized that the moment of truth was approaching, the moment he would need to confront not only Maria's dreams but the ghosts of his own choices. The silence swelled, weaving anticipation through their shared vision, while the reality of his decision weighed heavily on him. Richard felt a simmering tension within him, a questioning of whether he could emerge from this and discover the man he wished to become. As Maria's enthusiasm washed over him like a wave, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, knowing full well that his next move could change everything irrevocably. But deep down, an unsettling thought emerged. The time had come for Richard Langley to face not just the world, but himself. Richard leaned forward, his palms pressed against the wooden cafe table, attempting to capture the momentum generated by Maria's effusion. Central to her tapestry of plans was the idea of local collaboration connecting the townspeople in ways he had never thought possible. He listened intently, envisioning her dream as not merely an escape but a blueprint of transformation they could both shape. "You see, Richard," she said, her voice rising in enthusiasm, "we don't need a fortune to implement change. Just commitment. A willingness to invest in people." Her eyes sparkled with conviction. "Imagine harnessing the skills and creativity of our community. We could start a marketplace, swap meet, something that brings everyone together while revitalizing what's been neglected. As she spoke, Richard felt both exhilaration and trepidation. Years of solitary ambition had dulled his capacity to dream collaboratively, to appreciate the potential embedded in vulnerability. He had always calculated risks within the parameters of profit margins and market shifts, yet now he was being asked to take a leap of faith, a challenge that demanded he reconsider every single instinct he'd honed over a lifetime. "And I want you to be part of this, Richard," Maria continued, her voice lower, as if drawing him into a pact. "Your experience, your network. You can influence this. But it must come from a place of sincerity, not just out of necessity." The suggestion unsettled him. Could he really engage without ulterior motives? His past, with its shrouded intentions, loomed like a specter. He felt the narrative of his life flickering, a battle between the self-serving titan he had become and the man yearning for redemption. To merge these identities was daunting yet liberating. Richard pondered Maria's words, evaluating the costs of involvement compared to the potential rewards. Yet with burgeoning ambition came a darker realization: what if he failed? The ghosts of his past whispered harshly, reminding him of broken relationships and squandered potential. Their taunts settled heavily in his stomach, weaving a thread of anxiety through his thoughts. Am I capable of genuine collaboration? He mused internally, as he found himself at a crossroads, grappling with the notion of community not as a liability but as a lifeline. I want to help, he finally said, surprising even himself. Hesitation dripped from each syllable as he added, but I need to understand what it means to truly invest. Vulnerability was foreign terrain now, and making the commitment to facilitate without grasping for power felt like grieving a lost identity. Maria's face radiated warmth, seemingly sensing the internal battle he faced. Let us work together, then evolve together, she proposed gently. We'll learn from everyone involved. You might even surprise yourself. As they dove deeper into planning, Richard felt an unfamiliar sensation, the stirrings of hope. They sketched out ideas, flooded with discussions of resource allocation, community engagement strategies, and innovative solutions to revive a place he had once written off. Richard took a significant step back from the traditional mindset, daring to adopt a more inclusive stance, but the work ahead would not be without obstacles. A forgotten conversation with his assistant echoed in his mind, an unresolved confrontation that had shadowed their workplace. Richard knew that shedding his old skin would require tearing down structures he clung to, both in business and personal life. As their meeting progressed, Richard caught glimpses of a flickering ember in himself, an awareness of both opportunity and challenge. This project would test more than his creativity, it would unearth the man hidden behind the wealth and the walls he'd built. Stepping outside the cafe, he felt the crisp air invigorate him. But the happiness was tinged with anxiety. How would he lead in this unfamiliar direction? Would the townspeople welcome a leader who questioned his motives? The thought burrowed deep within him, instilling apprehension as they walked back toward their vehicles, determined not to let fear navigate his next steps. Richard knew he had to confront his assistant soon, unraveling the turmoil brewing in their workplace. Maria's venture was his last best hope. The moment of reckoning loomed larger, and with it, the uncertainties he craved to dismantle. Perhaps by confronting his past missteps, he could find not only clarity but also redemption. But as he climbed into his car, the doubt gnawed at him painfully. Would he find the courage to examine the ghosts of his choices and come out unscathed? Richard sat in his car, the engine idling as his mind raced through the potential consequences of the choices ahead. The anticipation of confronting his assistant felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, overlooking uncertainty. What would he say? Certainly, he had to address the unresolved tension, the heavy fallout from their last exchange. Yet, each scenario played out like a predictable script, and he was weary of clichés. This was a moment demanding authenticity. As he navigated towards the office, the weight of those past decisions crept back, tightening its grip on his resolve. He parked and sat for a moment in silence, gathering himself. Today, he was not merely a businessman, the stakes had escalated, and he needed to show up differently. The interior of the office felt stark and uninviting, the sterile decor a sharp contrast to the vibrant dreams he had sketched with Maria. He headed toward his assistant's desk, a small space dwarfed by the immensity of their corporate environment. Ella looked up as he approached, her gaze a blend of curiosity and uncertainty. "Richard," she began, her voice tentative. "We need to discuss cutting in," he said. "No. I need to apologize first." The words felt foreign, unaccustomed to his tongue. The flicker of surprise in her eyes encouraged him. "I realize our last conversation was less about communication and more about me defending my position. I didn't consider the impact my decisions had on you or this team." He noted the way she shifted, as if processing the unexpected frankness. This was precisely the vulnerability Maria had coaxed from him, but he couldn't falter now. He needed to maintain his footing on this new path. "Our projects aren't just numbers or results to me anymore," he continued, more firmly. "I want to collaborate, to work together in a way that feels respectful and worthwhile. I know I've often prioritized profit, and I want to change that." Ella's expression softened, but Richard could sense the residual skepticism lingering behind her eyes. "Are you sure that's how you really feel? You've been distant." His heart raced as he braced for a harder edge of their history. Direct confrontation had never been his strong suit, but that discomfort was precisely the ground he needed to traverse. "I've been distant because I didn't know how to connect. Risks were easier to calculate than relationships, but I see now how that perspective poisoned everything." "What has changed?" she asked, skepticism threading through her tone. "Did someone convince you?" "Actually, yes," he admitted. "Maria opened my eyes to the potential of genuine partnership. It requires courage, and I'm trying to find mine." Her brow furrowed slightly, curiosity battling disbelief. "You're serious about transforming how we operate?" "I am," he stated, the conviction crystallizing. "But it will mean doing some things differently. I might stumble, but I'm committed to this path. I want your input, your expertise. Your thoughts matter." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken histories and newfound opportunities. Ella seemed to evaluate him, perhaps weighing the chance for reconciliation against the past. "I didn't expect this, Richard," she finally replied, her voice less guarded. "If we're really going to shift our focus, it's going to take more than just talk. We'll need to work together beyond the confines of these walls." "Exactly," he said, feeling a trace of optimism seep into the conversation. "Let us brainstorm new ideas that support not just our objectives, but the energy of the people involved. I'm ready to embrace the messiness of collaboration." The spark in her eyes indicated she was considering the possibility, but Richard was still aware of the road ahead. Together, they could dismantle the barriers that had long defined their interactions. With a newfound sense of purpose coursing through him, he smiled, relishing this unanticipated alliance. However, the impact of this conversation reached far beyond the office. Would confronting his old ways bring about lasting change, or were his old instincts bound to return? Walking away from Ella's desk, Richard felt buoyed by what might come next. Yet, the shadow of remaining doubt lingered. Would he be capable of sustaining this transformation amid the chaos that awaited? He stepped outside, letting the sun warm his face, but within, conflict simmered. The path ahead was murky, and in just a few hours, he would face the anticipated meeting with community members, where he might either solidify this new commitment or unravel completely. The moment of truth loomed closer. Would he genuinely embrace his evolution, or inadvertently retreat to his former self? Richard walked through the bustling office, the sound of keyboards clacking and phones ringing blending into a mesmerizing rhythm. Each step felt stronger than the last, buoyed by the unexpected connection he had just forged with Ella. He wished he could hold on to this newfound resolve, but the nagging doubt still whispered in the corners of his mind. He remembered the last time he had felt authentic with his team. It had been too long. The pressure of targets and profits had clouded his judgment, leading him to overlook the humanity in those around him. Today, with Ella's cautious support, he had offered a glimpse of a different Richard, one that was willing to be vulnerable and imperfect. As he made his way to the meeting with the community members, he began reflecting on the stakes. Each decision he had made in the past had been driven by a fear of failure, an instinct to control the narrative and force an outcome. But this time, he recognized that control often suffocated potential. He was stepping into a realm rife with unpredictability, where trust and cooperation would have to take precedence over dominance. In the meeting room, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Richard entered, and faces turned toward him, some expressions expectant, others skeptical. He could feel a palpable barrier of distrust lingering in the air. It reminded him of a shield he himself had once worn, fortified by years of merciless competition. "Thank you all for being here today," Richard began, the words tumbling out with a mixture of eagerness and trepidation. "I realize that many of you might be feeling uncertain about my intentions. I hope to clarify that today." He paused, gauging reactions. There were no overt signs of encouragement, just a sea of eyes assessing him. With newfound courage, he pressed on. "I've been distant, focused solely on the numbers without regard for how they impact our community and our environment. That's changing. I'm committed to establishing authentic partnerships that benefit us all." Softening his tone, Richard added, "I genuinely want to hear your perspectives not as an executive giving directives, but as a colleague who respects your insights and experiences." A woman in the front interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "And what guarantees do we have that this isn't just another corporate PR move? You've avoided these conversations until now." The question hung heavy in the air, challenging his resolve. It was easy to revert to defensiveness, to bury himself in justifications, but he was acutely aware of how maintaining that stance had led to isolation. Instead, he took a deep breath and confronted the challenge head-on. "You don't have guarantees," he admitted, his voice steady. "What I'm offering is a promise that I will strive to listen and integrate your voices into our strategies. I'm willing to be held accountable for my actions moving forward." To his surprise, the vulnerability he displayed seemed to crack the barrier ever so slightly. A few nods appeared around the room, unexpected but welcome signs of engagement. He rumbled forward, recognizing this was an opportunity, not just to lead but also to grow. "What if we brainstorm ideas together? What if we define key objectives as partners and uncover solutions that resonate with our community's needs?" His passion flooded the room, and he could feel the walls bending under the weight of sincerity. Encouraged by the glimmers of interest, Richard wanted to ensure this was not just talk. He realized he would have to invest time and energy not just in meetings, but in conversations that explored real concerns, driving enthusiasm and commitment. As feedback began to pour in, Richard felt invigorated by each shared thought, a fresh perspective urging him toward collaborative innovation. He could see community members starting to lean in, exchanging ideas rather than simply waiting for orders. But, as the vocal exchange unfolded, a nagging thought resurfaced in Richard's mind: could he sustain this vulnerability? Would he truly change the approach that had served him so well in the past? The meeting provided some momentum, but he had many steps ahead to validate this new direction. The hesitation of his old habits lingered close, shadowing him as a reminder of how easy it would be to slip back into familiar patterns. As he left the meeting room, a sense of nervous excitement bubbled within him. He had begun to pave a new path, but the ultimate test lay ahead. Could he maintain this shift and inspire trust not just among his team, but within himself? Richard turned a corner in the hallway, clenching his fists in quiet determination. Yet an unsettling question gnawed at him: what would happen when the challenges they faced proved formidable, testing his resolve? Richard moved slowly through the office, his mind racing with the reflections from the meeting. The connection he had felt with the community members had sparked something deep within him. Yet, the true challenge was not just the dialogue he had started but the ongoing commitment to sustain this authenticity. The realization sat heavily on his shoulders. Maintaining vulnerability was a daily choice he had to make. He understood that to genuinely transition from a detached executive to a partner among peers, he would have to cultivate this newfound attitude like a delicate seedling in an unpredictable world. With every interaction, he would need to embody this shift, Could he redefine what it meant to be a leader who inspired trust rather than just commanded compliance? The weight of expectation loomed large as he prepared for his next round of meetings. Richard's calendar was rigid, filled with conferences and presentations, yet he felt compelled to carve out time for informal discussions with his team as well. An impromptu coffee chat here, a walk and talk there. These small deviations from the norm would be essential to building rapport and dismantling the fortress he had constructed over the years. As he entered the conference room, the usual atmosphere of formality hung in the air. Richard sensed an underlying current of skepticism from his colleagues, a mixture of caution and expectation. He could either retreat into the persona he had long cultivated or embrace the challenge of connecting with the humans behind the titles. "Before we start with the agenda today, I want to set a different tone," he initiated, glancing at the faces around the table. "I realize that our meetings often become a checklist of business outcomes, and I want to change that. I want to know how you're doing, really. Your insights and experiences are vital." Silence enveloped the room, but a spark of curiosity flickered in some eyes. He pressed on, shaking off the impulse to over-explain as he had so often done in the past. "What barriers are you facing? What excites you? Let us talk about what matters not just in our projects, but to us as individuals." To his surprise, the accountability he had promised began to shift the tone of the meeting. Colleagues started sharing not only concerns about workloads but also aspirations they had set aside. For the first time in a long time, Richard felt the walls of protocol beginning to crumble. He engaged with each thought, consciously avoiding the impulse to analyze or critique. Instead, he practiced an openness that felt both freeing and terrifying. As conversations flourished, Richard began to see traces of his old self in others' fear of vulnerability, the impulse to hold back. It struck him, he had spent so many years in a combat-ready stance that he had forgotten how to be a team player. This push for connection wasn't just about leading, it was about redefining his own identity. However, a new, unsettling truth emerged. Real transformation would demand sacrifices. He might face pushback and resistance, especially from those who had flourished under the guise of traditional leadership. Was he truly ready to risk being misunderstood or doubted by colleagues who had come to expect a different approach? Richard couldn't shake the feeling that even his commitment to change would face intense scrutiny. As he wrapped up the meeting, the energy in the room shifted, uncertainty mingled with anticipation. Could he follow through on this path, willing to embrace the criticism that might accompany his evolution? This choice, which felt thrilling and daunting, powered him forward, a deeper commitment to not just lead but also to listen. Leaving the conference room, a sense of purpose surged in him alongside a creeping doubt. The foundation he was building felt shaky, vulnerable. Richard couldn't escape the question, what would he do when the inevitable resistance arrived? With each step toward his office, the stakes intensified. The future loomed uncertain, filled with potential and peril alike. Yet something deeper ignited a want for more. Perhaps the real challenge lay not in fostering change, but in learning to trust himself amidst the growing chaos. And so, as he turned down a quiet corridor, he felt that familiar knot of anxiety alongside a flicker of hope. What would happen when his newly found resolve clashed with the hardest obstacles he would face yet? Richard settled into his office, feeling the weight of expectations crash upon him. The sterile atmosphere, drenched in expensive art and polished furniture, felt suffocating. He swiveled his chair as he gazed out the window, taking in the urban sprawl below, but his thoughts were elsewhere. What if the very change he sought risked unraveling the delicate fabric of trust he had begun to weave? The stirring excitement of vulnerability intermingled with his fear of criticism, leaving him in an unsettling limbo. Over the next week, Richard sought opportunities to further his new approach. He initiated informal check-ins with team leaders, consciously stepping away from the formal chains of command. He poured coffee for a junior analyst, asking about their weekend, genuinely wanting to understand what motivated them beyond spreadsheets and deadlines. However, while most interactions flowed smoothly, there were tension-filled moments that sparked discontent. Susan, a longtime member of his team, met him with folded arms and a cool expression one afternoon as he tried to discuss the new shift. "What's really going on, Susan?" he probed, though the air thickened with a mixture of defensiveness and disbelief. "I just don't see the point of all this touchy-feely stuff, Richard. We have a job to do. We're not here to share our feelings." Her words cut deeper than he expected, igniting a tight knot in his stomach. Did she expect him to retreat into his old ways? The part of him that had thrived in a more transactional environment fought feverishly against the impulse to defend himself. Instead, he took a breath, grounding himself in the resolve that had grown amidst the week's interactions. "Maybe it's not about sharing feelings but rather about understanding the whole picture," he responded, keeping his tone steadier than his heartbeat. "If we don't know what drives us individually, how can we come together to achieve what we need to as a team?" Richard was taken aback by his own clarity amidst the storm of emotions. He didn't want to change for the sake of pleasing, but rather to foster a culture in which every voice was valued. He would have to adopt patience, knowing that old wounds take time to heal. Yet, with every confrontation, the shadows of doubt began to dissipate a little more. The following week presented a crucial moment: a leadership retreat set in a secluded lodge outside the city. Richard viewed it not just as an escape but as a pivotal opportunity to deepen connections while cultivating sincerity. Yet, beneath that enthusiasm lay another layer of anxiety. How would those resistant to his shift engage in this informal space? As they gathered around the crackling fire on the first evening, Richard put aside his meticulously prepared agenda and posed a simple question. "What does success mean to you?" He witnessed disbelief flickering across a few faces like a wisp of smoke. Did he dare to welcome dialogue instead of dictate outcomes? His heart raced with uncertainty, yet he pressed on, leaving room for silence as individuals pondered. One by one, members revealed insights that connected with personal aspirations and hidden fears, narratives that seemed to dissolve the barriers of authority. As the evening wore on, he began to see glimmers of transformation not only in his team but also within himself. The weight of conventional leadership lessened, enabling him to shoulder vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. But just as Richard felt a spark of hope ignited, the shadow of a deeper challenge loomed ahead. The following day, a longtime ally expressed concerns about their potentially flagging productivity. "What are we supposed to do when this all becomes too casual? We need results." Richard's pulse quickened. He recognized the fork in the road. Was he prepared to defend this new vision against those seeking to tether him back to old paradigms? The stakes were becoming clearer, nestled between his aspirations and the traditional expectations that still held sway. As discussions continued and bonds strengthened under the starlit sky, Richard's inner dialogue grew frantic. Could he truly sustain the momentum against such skepticism? He turned to the group, anchoring himself in determination. "We can achieve results without compromising our humanity. Our experiences and connections forge the path to true success." Yet as the words left his mouth, he felt a roiling sense that perhaps this retreat would test his commitment more than he had anticipated. The moment was ripe with promise, but could he endure the battle against the very culture he sought to change? The anxiety within him coiled tighter. Unresolved tension simmered across the campfire, waiting to burst forth. What would he do when pushed to choose between maintaining the facade and embracing authentic connection? The answer eluded him, yet one thing remained clear: the confrontation would arrive sooner than he hoped. As dawn broke over the retreat and morning mist curled around the trees like lingering doubts, Richard wrestled with the weight of the previous evening's dialogue. The embers from the campfire had turned to ash, yet his resolve flickered, a combination of hope and fear battling for dominance. He gathered his thoughts, hoping to shift gears from uncertainty to action. Seated back around the breakfast table, the chatter was tinged with an apprehension that mirrored his own. He observed Susan, still guarded despite the vulnerability displayed the night before. It was a reminder that trust was not a switch to flip but a process to navigate. Richard clenched his jaw, aware that he must maintain the momentum he had started. "Today, let us map out some actionable steps from our discussions," he suggested, his voice steady despite the tumult of his emotional undercurrents. The group's reaction was mixed. Some nodded, while others exchanged furtive glances. He could feel Susan's skepticism hanging like an oppressive fog. If he wanted to ensure his vision took root, he would need to address it head-on. "Susan, let's talk about that concern you raised yesterday. What concrete results do you envision as an outcome of our new approach?" He challenged, turning the focus onto her. She hesitated, her fingers tapping a subconscious rhythm on the table. The room held its breath as the spotlight shifted. "I just think we're losing our edge. If we don't focus on outcomes, then what's the point?" "I understand. But what if our outcomes are directly tied to how connected we feel as a team?" Richard countered, the calm exterior belying the fervor simmering within. "Let's brainstorm ways we can integrate our human sides to enhance performance. What if we established metrics not only for productivity but also for morale?" The tension crackled, and for a moment, Richard questioned whether he had overstepped. But there was a glimmer of interest in others' eyes, the potential for collaboration sparking curiosity. They began to throw ideas out, interspersing laughter with serious discussion, and he felt a surge of elation. This was the shift he sought, a movement towards engagement. However, as the day unfolded with shared activities and deeper discussions, the impending confrontation loomed closer. By evening, Richard could sense the burgeoning discontent swirling anew, among those who remained committed to the old way. Among them was Mark, a fiercely competent colleague who had thrived in the performance-driven culture that Richard was now challenging. "Are you really prepared to sacrifice accountability for camaraderie?" Mark leaned forward, his expression hardening. "This isn't a therapy session, it's business." Richard felt the familiar twinge of defensiveness rewriting his emotional script. "I'm not sacrificing accountability, Mark. I'm adding a layer of understanding." He paused, feeling the eyes of his team shift between them, anxiety thickening the air. He recognized this was a pivotal moment not just for Mark, but for everyone witnessing the exchange. "What if we just tweak our existing metrics to include collaboration scores?" he proposed, not just to placate Mark, but to show that he could adapt while holding true to his vision. The hesitation from Mark struck a note of urgency in Richard. He needed to remain steadfast yet flexible. "I mean, we could trial that over the next quarter and see if it makes a difference," Richard suggested, feeling the adrenaline coursing through him as he pushed against the rush of uncertainty. Mark nodded slowly, the hard lines in his face softening just a fraction. "Fine. I'm willing to give it a shot if we can still meet our targets. But if this doesn't work, don't expect everyone to stay on board." Richard felt the weight of Mark's conditional acceptance. The stakes were high, and with allies like Mark, he would need to tread carefully. Yet beneath his doubts loomed an undeniable sense of empowerment. As twilight cloaked the lodge in shadows, the discomfort mingled with determination. Richard understood that tomorrow would not just be another day, it would be a decisive test of kindred spirits against the old guard of professionalism. Would his commitment to genuine leadership withstand the pressure, or would it collapse under the demands of traditional expectations? Tomorrow, as his team's resolve solidified or splintered, Richard would have to confront not just external resistance but the uncertainties etched deep within himself. The moment approached when he would have no choice but to face the limits of his own vision, and with it, the deeper question remained: who was he truly capable of becoming as a leader? The following morning, Richard woke with the sunrise, invigorated and anxious. The crisp air sliced through the stillness of dawn, and as he breathed it in, he felt every molecule charge his resolve. Today would be pivotal. His team needed to see the strength in vulnerability, and he had to be the one to lead the charge. After a quick breakfast, Richard gathered everyone in the main hall. The atmosphere was thick with tension, palpable within the walls. Faces were lined with skepticism and concern, shadowed under the weight of uncertainty. As the group settled, Richard fell quiet, taking a moment to absorb the collective energy in the room. It was now or never. "Today, I want to challenge the status quo," he began, his voice steady. "We've seen my vision collaboration over competition. But I haven't shared my personal story. Why I believe in this approach." Surprised glances flickered between Susan and Mark, and Richard could sense their curiosity. He pressed on, pinning his thoughts to the vulnerability he had long avoided revealing. Not long ago, I was involved in a company that prioritized performance over all else. We hit targets, made profits, but at what cost? I nearly lost everything, including my own connection to why I do what I do. The pressure became unbearable, and I ended up burnt out and disenfranchised. He noted the shift in expressions, tentative nods replacing earlier skepticism. What I learned is that the human element is critical. It's not just about hitting numbers, it's about ensuring we are healthy and engaged within ourselves and with each other. A murmur rippled through the group. Richard's eyes caught Susan's for a brief moment, and he sensed a faint glimmer of understanding. I want to be transparent. This isn't just an experiment, it's necessary for sustainable growth. I'm willing to put my reputation on the line for this team. Together, we must create a safe space where challenging ideas mean strengthening our resolve rather than shying away. Encouraged, he proposed a new project, a team exercise to forge connections and build a shared vision. Let us produce something together that isn't just about work, but about who we are as individuals. Richard saw eagerness appear in some members, and it fueled his spirit. But Mark's expression remained skeptical. You expect everyone to participate in a trust fall exercise? Are we really going to regress just to achieve team bonding? Richard felt the defensiveness rising again, but this time he took a breath. Mark, I understand your apprehension. But these activities will prove that we can bond as people, and in turn, that will transform our productivity. We need to trust each other if we want the company to thrive. The harshness of Mark's gaze softened while others began to engage. They brainstormed elements for the upcoming project, shifting the conversation from uncertainty to enthusiasm. Laughter broke the tension as Richard fostered an exchange of ideas, yet, even as the room warmed to this collaborative energy, he sensed a shadow at the corner. Someone was quiet. Amy, a newer member of the team, her face a mask of contemplation. I appreciate what you're trying to build, but what if it doesn't work? What happens then? The weight of her question hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Would their efforts yield fruit, or merely amplify their failures? The risk of vulnerability loomed again, a paradox of leadership he had faced before. I can't promise you results, Amy. What I can promise is intent, and a commitment to learning together. If we fail, we'll learn and try again. That's the essence of growth. As Richard spoke, he realized the foundation of his vision wasn't based solely on achieving outcomes, but was ingrained in brotherhood, perseverance, and resilience. How far was he willing to lean into this ethos amidst uncertainty? As the meeting closed, Richard felt an invigorating dissonance in his stomach. There was heavy lifting ahead, the ripple of doubt had transformed into a wave of complex emotions, but he was ready to surf it. Walking back to his room, he found himself at the crossroads of his journey as a leader. Would they embrace this new path of connectivity, or retreat into familiar patterns? Tomorrow held the answer, but not before a confrontation simmering beneath the surface became inevitable. He felt it in the air. A challenge was looming, perhaps from within but definitely from Mark. The path ahead was uncertain, but Richard realized it just might define the leader he was meant to become. The stakes were rising, and with them, the urgency of a decision that could either solidify his vision or expose the fragility of its foundation. Would he yield to doubt, or would courage lead the way? The sun rose on the final day of the leadership retreat. Richard laid awake, reflections of the varied emotions experienced over the past few days swirling in his mind. His transformation from an isolated businessman into a leader willing to embrace vulnerability and collaboration was nearing a crucial test. Today was the day when all that he had envisioned could either solidify or shatter under scrutiny. As he gathered his team once more, anticipation filled the air. The energy was different this morning, charged with hope yet still cautious. Richard felt the responsibility weighing down on him. His choices would shape not only his future but the future of those around him. He took a moment to observe their faces, realizing the commitment they exhibited was an investment in something greater than financial gain. Good morning, everyone, he began, his voice calm yet deliberately powerful. Yesterday, I shared my vision for integrating collaboration into our culture. Today, I want to put it into action. The murmurs of curiosity rippled through the group, and Richard felt a surge of confidence. He proposed an initiative that encouraged teams to work on a community project, a revitalization plan for the very neighborhood their company had relied upon for resources. He emphasized the interplay between corporate performance and community well-being. What we do here impacts lives beyond our office walls. This is an opportunity for us to give back, to intertwine our success with the capacity to create meaningful change. The room's atmosphere shifted as each member began to discuss potential ideas, the energy palpable as their ambition sparkled with newfound purpose. He witnessed a unity that had long eluded him, a collective spirit emerging to explore the unknown. But as enthusiasm built, Richard spotted Mark, who shifted uneasily, wrestling with the transition. Richard approached him, determined to turn the tide. "Mark, I know this feels different. I want to hear your disbelief. Let us address these concerns together." Mark hesitated, his gaze scanning the room before settling on Richard. "All of this sounds great, but what assurance do we have it won't dilute our focus? How do we balance community outreach with our responsibility to deliver results?" Richard took a breath, internalizing the weight of responsibility for both the team and the community. By investing in our local culture, we ensure a stronger local economy which ultimately benefits us all. This is not about losing focus, it's about recalibrating our priorities toward sustainable success. We can emerge as pioneers, championing meaningful change while achieving our business objectives. Richard sensed the acknowledgement flicker across Mark's face. Perhaps there was a glimmer of acceptance. Richard spoke from the heart, articulating a desire not merely to lead, but to unite everyone under a common purpose. "I'm not asking you to take a leap of faith without a net, I'm asking you to shape this net alongside me," he urged, refraining from forceful persuasion. The quiet determination resonating in his voice hung in the air, urging camaraderie over conflict. As the discussion continued, Richard's moments of engagement began to flourish. The once thick cloud of skepticism began to dissipate, revealing opportunities for collaboration. Team members stepped forward, ideas blossoming into reality. They brainstormed ways to leverage their business networks, maximize volunteer efforts, and create events that would foster a sense of community ownership. Richard felt a surge of pride as he witnessed Mark slowly converting his skepticism into support. This pivotal shift solidified Richard's belief that vulnerability did not mean weakness, it signaled strength and courage in collaboration. Later that afternoon, Richard stood before the gathering, ready to unveil their idea to the district council. His heart pulsed with determination, fueled by the shared vigor of his team. The members of the council faced an unexpected front, an organized effort led by local businesses willing to invest in the community as true stakeholders. Together, they pitched the revitalization plan, the marketplace, local partnerships, and opportunities for artisans, and he could see the fire ignite within his colleagues. When the council responded with enthusiastic support and faith in their vision, Richard realized this was a defining moment, not just for his company, but for his own growth. He had achieved something deeper than mere collaboration, he had fostered a sense of purpose. As they walked out of the council meeting, Richard caught a glimpse of Maria waiting outside. She smiled with pride, her spirit reflecting the transformation that had taken place in him. "You did it, Richard," she said simply, yet those words felt profound, an affirmation of growth, clarity, and substantial personal achievement. In that moment, Richard understood that true success lay not within the confines of wealth and status, but in the strength of relationships built through authenticity and purpose. He had demonstrated the infinite power of transforming despair into action, of conjuring up communal bonds out of individual ambition. As he departed that day, Richard carried not just the weight of leadership, but the gratifying knowledge that he had successfully stepped into the role he had long shunned and come to embrace together, as a team. He had conquered his fears, proven his mettle, and established deep-rooted connections that anchored him firmly on the path to fulfillment. This was who Richard Langley was meant to be, not just a leader but a man inspired by empathy and commitment to community. Remember, the only way to keep experiencing incredible personal transformation stories like this one is to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and let us spread the message that resilience transforms lives. Comment your thoughts and theories about Richard's incredible journey and what you felt during this story. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. You need to support these narratives that showcase the strength of personal growth. Don't wait even one more second to share and inspire others.